Any specific questions that you want to ask about?
Can we talk about Agile?
Okay, yeah. All right. The way you execute an Agile Scrum project would be different from a normal SDLC, right? So there primarily the differences are that you focus based on the importance of the requirements. So you pick up the most important requirements and then take it up in the first sprint, right? And the feedback is continuously incorporated. Okay, so uh, the second major thing is the level of documentation and the way you collaborate, right? So a typical SDLC, everything has to be formally documented and reviewed, and then only it moves on to the next phase, right? So those restrictions are taken out of the Scrum model, right? So effectively, there is no change management process in Scrum model. If the team feels that the change needs to be done, it needs to be done. So it assumes that the team is responsible enough to take its own decisions. So effectively, you feel that the team is responsible and they know what needs to be done. And if something is required, it is required. So they don't put a restriction that it has to be reviewed or approved and all that. So they leave that decision making to the team which is on the ground, right? So rather than uh, having another team and approving it, so they enable the team. They are empowered to take those decisions. Okay, that's a major difference here. And primarily looking at our role, we contribute to prioritization of the product or prioritization of the requirements or creation of the product backlog, right? So at the end of it, what you do is you'll identify the key requirements and then break it up and then put them, prioritize them into multiple releases. So here if you can see that all these would have been in release 1, and then all these would have been in release 2, and this would have come out as part of release 3, right? So this clarity of arranging your requirements into different sprints or releases is done as part of your product backlog creation. Okay. Now, once this is created, then these requirements would be picked up, and then the overall sprint execution would happen. Okay. So we contribute towards this process. There would be a product owner who would own the requirement. It's similar to a solution owner in our normal SDLC process. Then you would have a Scrum Master, and then you as a business analyst would primarily the product owner, and then the business analyst would create the product roadmap, right? So you're engaging with the product owner and then figuring out what is important, what should come there, and then create this view. Okay. Then you would pick up each requirements, and then it goes through the process of each sprint execution. How do you capture the requirements? This is the framework that you would use, right? So a user story mainly has 3 parts: description, conversation, and confirmation. Okay. So all that is generally done using a postcard size post-it note. Okay. So the front and back are used. Let's say this is the front side. And this is the back side. Okay. So the top 1-2 lines are used for defining the description. So the first 5-10 minutes. So you take a post-it card size post-it note. Usually the requirement is captured in these 3 ways, 3 sections. The top part, usually the top 1/4 part is used to define your requirement, right? Describe your requirement. It's it basically a 2-3 liner write-up, which basically tells who is the person who using it, what is he trying to achieve, and what is the benefit he would get, right? Basically the user, right, and action, what he would do, right? and what is the benefit you would get, right, or value you would derive, right? So these three things are covered in your description, and just in 1-2 lines, you're not going to give a detailed overview, right? Then the rest of the screen is used for explaining about how this overall process happens, right? So you could show a screenshot, or maybe you could show the process flow, or you could give a step-by-step description. So it's up to you how you want to describe it. But usually you will show how a screen would look like, and what needs to happen at each of these. What is a conversation which generally happens, right? Then at the back of the post-it note, you will capture the confirmation, right? So this part is a conversation, right? So we are basically explaining uh, how the requirement would be met, and then at the back of the post-it note, you have the confirmation, right? So basically, this is nothing but how can you say that the requirement is complete? How would you validate it? Right? How would you test it? Right? So you list down all those conditions, right? If all these conditions are satisfied, this means that the requirement is complete, right? So this is the framework for a user story, right? So your role as a business analyst would be create these user stories. So you will talk to the customer, understand the requirement, write the high-level user story, capture the conversation, and the confirmation as well. Okay, that is how it works. Okay. Any questions on this? Are you guys clear about this, or you still have any questions? Who was that? Avi who asked it? Or, yeah.
So, is there a timeline they set for this requirement?
Now, usually, at the start of the day, right? So, go back to this screen, right? At the start of the day, in each of the sprint, you'll have something called as a daily stand-up meeting, right? So every day, it's a small meeting, like a 15-minute meeting or so, where everybody would clearly figure out what they need to do for the day, right? So if you are given so you'll be asked, okay, uh, so what is it that we want to achieve in that particular day, okay? So generally the sprint is like around 2 to 3 weeks, which means around 10-15 days is what you'll get, right? And you'll have, even the requirements are very short, like there are like 4 or 5 requirements which are picked up, and then you know the sprint planning happens is taken care by the scrum master. Okay, so you clearly figure that out. Okay, this is what we need to do, and that product backlog would have given you that view. And then you'll start picking each requirement and then start completing it. Right? So that's how it would be. So there's nothing like your timelines and all would have been adjusted according to the complexity of the requirements and all, right? So there's no hard and fast rule that each requirement should be complete in a day, or can be stretched to a week or so, right? So that depends on the functionality and the complexity of the requirements, right? So, but that's what we do, right? As part of the daily stand-up meetings, we'll figure out, okay, what we need to do for the day, and we'll also call out any dependencies on other teams or another people, and then ensure that the task is complete. Okay.
Yeah.
So your primary responsibility would be to write those user stories, right? So use that post-it notes and capture these details. Now there are some software also like Rally. I think I've taken you through that video explaining about how it could have been done in Rally, right? So you use, similar format is used. So these 3 sections would be used to capture your requirements. So it could be done on a post-it note, it could be done in a software, but the overall, the structure and then the details are the same, right? So that's how you would take up a Scrum Agile model project. Okay. So your role is still the same. You're engaging with the business team, understanding the requirements, coming back and documenting it. but the format you use, the way you interact and all that would differ from the type of the project, right? So earlier use cases you would have comprehensively described every detail, right? But here you're just giving that basic overview how the screen should look like, and if the developer or the architect has any questions, he will come out to you and then you would clarify it. So that's how it would work. Okay.
Sir,
Yeah.
sir, for agile techniques, what we do is, select few of the functions which we need at present for now, and leave few of them and complete that. So
Right.
in this case, are we not missing the sequence of the operations? Will that make a
No.
change?
So you'll pick it up such that the dependencies are maintained, right? So like for example, right, you can compose an email in 2-3 formats, right? So one is like a basic email without all those formatting and all, right? So even if you have that, it would still be good, right? So maybe that your formatting and then all those additional features can come in later, right? So that I would move it to the next release. What in the first release, what I want a basic email composition, right? I don't want all those formatting and then all those underlining, bold and making the font bold and the bullets and all that. I don't need it, right? I just maybe need something to write and then send it, right, as part of the compose function, right? But the formatting and all, it can commit in the next release, right? Similarly, I would say maybe I don't want to attach the files in the first version of the email, right? Sending the attachments would come in later. That is not a priority to me. I'll develop it later, right? So you're picking up the key things that I want in the first release, right? So you should be able to delete an email. So emptying the deleted items from your delete items folder, you're you're developing it in the second release. You don't want that in the first release. That is not of much importance to you at this point. You'll go into the next release. So while I understand there would be some dependencies, you'll try to keep that dependencies in mind, and usually the priority also would be like that, right? If something, if there are 3 or 4 requirements which are dependent on one, obviously that priority of that requirement becomes more. So you want to develop that in release 1,
Okay, sir,
right?
got it.
Yeah. So your the priority is also dependent on the dependencies, right? So if the dependencies are more, so you obviously have to have that functionality in the first release. So that becomes more important. So the highest priority will be assigned to that. Okay. So it's a
First,
combination of all this. Yeah.
yeah, first we need to show the basic idea. After detailing can be done afterwards.
Right. So that additional or the extended functionality can come in later. The basic core functionality you will try to bring it out in the first 1-2 releases. Right. So again, that's a decision which you'll have to take. I mean, it's basically the product owner's decision. So you will not decide which has to come in the first release or not. Right. So it's basically the product owner would say in the first release I want these 3-4 things to come in. Why? Because he knows that what is important, what is not important, he will know, right? So he will tell us that this needs to. So that definition of the product backlog will be done by the product owner. Right? So the product backlog once you have created, then you'll pick up all of these. And then you'll start the release in this way, right? So then each one is then brought here. So this is like And so this is how it will look like, right? Your final, the requirements board would look like this. So you'll pick up each requirement, and then you'll start capturing the requirement for this. Then once you capture the requirement, then you'll pick up another requirement. Once this is completed, then you'll pick up another one. So while the architect would design this, and then he would the developer would develop it. After that, the tester would test it, right? And finally, it could move into the completed one, right? So this is the process in which it would go on, right? So you're not waiting like one step to complete to start the next one, right? So like all the requirements are completed, then only you move to the design phase in a waterfall model, right? So that doesn't happen in case of Agile. Right? So you'll have this view coming in. Okay, see again, we need to while we have covered a lot of topics, right? Your interview should focus on what is important to that particular project, right? So he would have clearly given you those guidelines in your job description, right? When you're applying or when you're preparing for interviews, you should definitely go through the job description, right? So what is it that these guys are asking me? Right? Are they asking me about, is there focus on change request, or, a typical use case model kind of projects, or are they asking about Agile? So that will give you some pointers, right? So if you look at, no, I think this is more like a different type of role, right? So this is a financial analyst kind of role. So basically, it's not an IT business analyst, right? So, if you look at the roles or primary duties of a business analyst, they'll clearly tell you what is it that they're looking for, right? So you should work with the requesting business organization, project manager, and architects and all to build a business case, right? So we looked at this. So you'll have to help in the business case process, right? So which I've covered in yesterday's session, right? So then you have to guide teams in understanding to end-to-end business process. So basically, you will have to model that using a flow chart and then prepare that, right? So you could be asked questions on what is process modeling, right? So can you do a process modeling? So typical steps involve capturing the current process, then finding out the improvement areas, and then coming up with a to-be process view, right? So they'll try to understand the structured approach. Can you do that, right? So is there a structure or framework that you have in mind? So which is basically nothing but our process modeling or the business process engineering what we learned. Okay, then work with the project manager to clearly identify business objectives and scope, and create and maintain the business analysis portion of the project plan. So in the initial sessions, I have told you how to create the project plan for the requirement related activities. So that is nothing but this is specific what he's asking. Document the current and future state business processes, roles and responsibilities, and information system. So if you look at this, he's looking more from a process engineering point of role, right? So he's asking, can you document the current state? How do you do that? So usually we do that using flowcharts and swim lanes, and then find out improvement areas, and then document the future state. Right? How do you capture this overall process? Right? So you document the current state, then identify the gap, right? And then suggest the to-be state. All that you should be able to drive that process. Okay, this is nothing but process modeling. Right? So if you look at our questions, most of them would fall into one of these questions, right? So they won't be a straightforward question. You would just say, did you work on any of the projects wherein you you know worked on process modeling, or you did a process engineering kind of did you handle any process engineering kind of projects, right? So you'll have to answer that questions in that format, right? So then employ tools such as process catalog and traceability metrics, right, to track deliverables and progress made. So that's what was another question, right? What is traceability, right? I work with the organization change management. So they would want to know, do you know about change management? So how do you take it up when a request comes in? So they want the change management process, or what is a change request? How would you handle a change request, right? Then employee use cases or similar tools to document the details of the business process and information requirements. So your future state, you'll have to convert it into your use case diagram and then capture the detailed use case requirement, right? So are you familiar with the use case framework, right? So I think you need to add that questions, right? How would you capture the functional requirements? So what is a use case framework, right? And use cases. So all these kind of questions would come in, right? So all of it we have actually covered in the question in the course. Now you need to understand what are the job description, what is it that he is asking for, and then relate it to our topic that we have covered, right? And prepare for your interviews, making sure that whatever he asks, you have a answer for it, right? So then the next point was on to the test plan, right? So he is asking about, do you have you created any test plans, or have you created a test case, or manage the UAT, right? So we learned about it in the last few sessions, right? What are the process for it? So again, you can always say, I have worked on the functional testing part and handle these as activities as part of it, right? Lead team in identifying improved standard practices and KPIs and all. So again, they're looking at, can you take additional initiatives? So this is more like a desired thing, over and above your role, what you can do. Perform lean analysis to identify opportunities. So how would you go about improving the processes, right? So the process modeling, what are the various ways? Okay, maintains business process, business analysis practices across IT organization. Yeah, so all these are more like a you should be that initiative taker and all those kind of requirements, generic ones, right? But broadly, if you look at requirements still here, they're specifically asking that this is what is expected out of you, right? And you could relate all of that to what you have learned, right? The next challenge what you have is that you have to map that responsibilities or the job description what is asked by the customer to what you have learned, right? So spend time on that. Look at job description and then figure out, okay, what did this guy ask about, and what have I learned? So if this kind of question comes up in there, usually, when you go for an interview, they'll ask only these things. Have you worked on a change management process? Or can you create the test plan? Or can you, do you know about the use cases, right? So he would just, pick up his job description because that is exactly what he wants, right? So, a job description gives you a very good indication of what kind of questions he's going to ask you in the interview, right? So spend time on that when you go for interviews. You should prepare for these questions, right? So the next session, what I will do is I'll ask these questions. I would want you to answer each of these questions, right? So unless you have any other topics, that is what we'll do in the next one session. And then anyway, you can route your questions through your organizer. I will always be available there for clarifying any of your questions, right? But having said all that, from here on, the challenge is to prepare for your interviews, apply the learning what you have got from the previous 1.5 month, and ensure that you convert your interviews, right? So you map your job descriptions to the interviews, prepare for those questions, right? So while you know a lot of things, articulation is equally important, because you'll get some 30 seconds to answer the question, and at that point you cannot think through and then frame your response. It has to be already done, right? You should prepare for those questions, and then you should have the response in your mind, so that when the guy asks you the question, you exactly know what is it that you need to answer, right? So prepare for your interviews. Unless you do that, it's difficult to convert, right? Knowing stuff is one thing, articulating is another thing. So even the last time we had the questions, that was the feedback I had, right? So you broadly tend to understand the requirement, the topic, but the challenge is in articulating it. So you should be able to very clearly say that crisply in a 15-30 seconds time frame, because that is all what you'll get to answer a question. Let's look at a couple of other job descriptions as well. So you see, broadly, they would be the same, right? So business analyst: structure, analyze, and visualize current state, design and visualize the future state. So you're talking about, this is how my current state is, and these are the challenges or opportunities for improvement, and this would be the future state, and then capturing that into a functional specifications using use cases or so, right? So that's broadly would be the high level requirements. Right. So you should have a working knowledge of SDLC and Agile. Both of them we have covered, right? So you should be good in analytical and communication skills, QA activities, defining requirements and use cases. We have covered that. We have looked at the testing also, right? So you have a team player and leadership skills, right? So the broadly now he has told what he is expecting, right? He would definitely ask about use cases. He will definitely ask about, do you know about Agile? How do you carry out Agile project? What is your role in that? What are the typical SDLC models you worked in? Waterfall, iterative, prototyping, right? And then the QA, what do you know about testing, right? And how would you analyze a requirement? So that's all what he would ask. Okay. So if you go to another one, developing business process models and software rules. Right? So understanding the business rules from the current state and also the future state. Right? So what is process modeling? Right? So the questions are not more than 15-20 questions. Right? So if you prepare for that, and able to answer more than 60-70% of it, I think you're good there. Right? So it's very easy to convert the interviews. Be well prepared for the topics, and ensure that you can answer that questions to the point without any hiccups. Okay. So establishing and documenting requirements for user stories. So this guy is more inclined towards Agile, right? So performance-based process management, including ability to recognize key metrics. So basically, you're trying to improvise the current state to the future state. So he's talking about the process modeling, right? And process transformation, current state, gap, and then the future state, right? So that's the standard process which most of the process modeling works, right? So understanding of key phases of the project, Agile and waterfall environments, advanced word and visual skills. Visual also, we know what to how to capture, do the process modeling, how to create the use cases and all. Maybe you can check on YouTube. Half an hour session on YouTube would make you an expert in visual, right? Similarly on Word, right? So you don't really need to focus on those tool specific thing, but you'll clearly get indication if they are asking for visual skills. You know that you need to brush up your skills on that before I attend this interview, right? So he's asking about something, knowledge of Scrum. So I don't know. Let's search for it. Right? So it could be a tool or some software, right? So for program management. So maybe you can spend some time to understand that high level detail, right? So even not. All you can say is that, okay, I have some basic understanding about it and know about it, right? Because you cannot cover end-to-end requirements of what the client needs, right? So it's difficult to find that. But looking at the job description, you could get that knowledge, right? So that is what you need to do, right? So the first step on your overall, the getting a job process is done. You've learned some stuff. The next step is how would you articulate that thing, and then the third challenge would be when you get an interview call, map what and analyze the requirement. What is it that he's going to ask, and then be prepared for the interviews, right? So step 1 is done. 2 and 3 are yet to be done. You need to be prepared. Any more questions, guys? I think by now you should be fairly confident that you've learned all the stuff, right? The next steps are articulating it, preparing for your interview questions. I'll upload this questions. Like I don't see more than 15-20 questions, right? Uh, Broadly, these 10-20 questions what I've put in are the most important ones, right? So 6 over here and 6 over here broadly covers what we need to know. So I think testing is one of the thing, right? Uh, Test planning, creation, and test execution, right? So there a couple of more, maybe let me add that and then I'll upload it to the portal, right? All the questions, but broadly, you'll get enough leads on the internet also if you look at the questions. From a course point of view, it's comprehensively covered, right? Now be clear with that and then map it to your questions and then figure out, okay, now what is it that we are going to do, right? So be prepared for those responses, what kind of questions could come, anticipate, prepare. If you prepare for this, I think these 12 questions or 13 questions what I've listed down here, right? So I think you can easily answer some 60-70% of the questions coming in your interview. Be prepared for them. Tomorrow we'll spend one session. I'll ask these questions. I think that should be the last session what we have. Okay.
Sure. Okay.
All right then. Thanks everyone and all the best.